In this video, I'm going to share 3 exercises that will help you improve your airbrushing, especially if you're just starting out. And be sure to stick around until the end because I'm going to share which surface I recommend to practice on. Let's get into it right now. Exercise number 1 is shading. So the first thing to do with shading is to remember to go nice and light. You can always go heavier. So you want to be a fair distance away to start with. And just do some shaded dots. And then this way you can practice your intensity and you can also line them up underneath, which will give you practice with your accuracy. Try not to go too heavy, go as light as possible. I've gone a bit heavier here because that way it'll show up a bit better on camera. But let me just do a couple in between and I'll go really light. You can see, or you may not be able to see, but there is 2 shaded dots just in there. So I recommend to all of my students to start off with shaded dots. It works really well. It gets you practicing that double action, meaning you're pressing down for air and pulling back for paint, and you're also controlling your height and your amount of paint that you're putting on the surface. So once you've done some shaded dots and you're happy with them and you're confident, what I want you to do then is from a distance, again, I'm about 20 centimeters or a bit further away from the surface, keep the air press down and a nice light dusting. And then this is where it's important. You can see the overspray has traveled, so that's my nice shade. Now the next one, we want to do 50-50 overlap. So 50% of the next pass should overlap on the first pass. So again, from a distance, dust it in and then just keep dusting, and that's going to give you a nice even flat tone. So you can see that's nice and even, and you can definitely go back over it if you want to go heavier. And this is also a good method to build your colours. If you are going to do a flat tone, instead of trying to colour in straight away, if you have masked off a surface, then you can just layer that paint on softly. Keep the air on as you're doing it, and that is going to dry the surface. And that way you're going to have less chance of any of that paint leaking up underneath your masking or getting too wet. So you can see how easy that is to create. Now let me show you what happens if you don't do that 50-50 overlap. So if I do a pass like that, and then I try and come in here. This is exaggerated, but you can see these gaps, so you're not going to get a nice even tone. So that's what you don't want to do. Exercise number 2 is lines. So lines are usually one of the most difficult things to master, but again, you need that double action. It's going to feel weird to start with, but you want to keep the air press down, and then instead of coming in and just doing a line like that right across your page, if you are working on a page, which I suggest just to get your practice in, move in off the side, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. Now I'm keeping a consistent speed as well as height and paint flow, meaning how far I'm pulling back on the trigger to get a nice consistent line. If I go too slowly, there's more chance that I'm going to shake, and I'll just deliberately do it. And it could look like that, which is cool if you want that effect, but we're not trying to go for that. We want a nice straight line. Or if I'm varying my height, then it's going to look more like this. And same with my speed. If I go too fast, that's not too bad, but if I go, you know, it's still not perfect. It's not nice and consistent. You can see it's a bit heavier here, and then it gets a bit lighter there as I've sped up. All right, same thing if I go too slow, then it could potentially spider out, and it's a much heavier line. Like that. So if we take a look, you can see it's spidered out along there, so it's a bit too heavy, so you want to avoid that as well. So now from this camera angle, just to show you again, you can see I'm steadying myself with my other hand. You can also run it flat, which will help if you want to do a fine line. So air on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. And what I'm also doing is I'm looking ahead of the line. So don't look where your airbrush is, look ahead of the line and just follow that. And if you want just a thicker sort of line, then you can again space yourself. So with your knuckle there, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off, paint on, paint off. Exercise number 3 is dots. Now, when you're doing dots, make sure that your needle is clear of all tip drying. You'll also notice that I'm running without the air cap on. If you're just starting out, you might want to put the air cap on. However, it does make it more difficult to manage the tip drying, so I like to leave mine off. So with fine dots, again, I like to use my hand and just rest my airbrush on my hand like so, and then just pull back a little bit and just create that fine dot. Once you've done a row of them, work back underneath and try and line them up. See how fine you can go. Now this airbrush, the GSI Krios PS289, has a 0.3mm needle nozzle setup, but you can see I can go really fine with it. It's just about getting that paint mix and PSI ratio correct, and I've got other videos showing you exactly how to do that, so I'll link all them up in the description for you, as well as products that I'm using within this video. So starting to tip dry a bit now, but if you take a closer look, you can see I've got some really nice fine dots in there, especially that one there. That one's great. Even that one's fantastic, same with that. So a lot of people always ask if the needle size has a lot to do with the detail. Yes, it does, but once you get your paint mix and all your control up to speed, then you'll be able to do this sort of stuff with a 0.3, not a problem at all. Even a 0.35 Eclipse will do that. And here is my bonus tip. Okay, so this might surprise you, but the surface that I recommend that you should work on and practice on as a beginner are t-shirts. Why do I recommend t-shirts? It's because they absorb the paint and you can also see exactly where you're going to be spraying. The Trident paints work fine on t-shirts and can be heat set. All you need to do before washing them is spray a couple of coats of t-shirt booster over the top of your artwork, and that is going to help to seal it. Then what you do is you heat set it with an iron, no steam, or you can use a heat press if you have one, and then just wash it on a cold cycle is always best. And I've got the t-shirt stretched over just a core flute here, so you can pick this up from sign supply shops or art shops. Even some stationery suppliers might have it. And I've just cut the corners off to make it easier to slip them on. So you can probably see a bit of an impression underneath here. That's from one of the students that used this previously, and the impression has gone through the t-shirt onto the core flute. The good thing is when I press down for air, you can see how it makes an impression within the t-shirt. And you can see how nice it is to work on. If you are going to colour in a section, just have a sharp edge first, so up nice and close. Then you can see I'm doing paint on, paint off with the trigger, keeping that air on at all times. Just to get that edge coloured in. Because what you don't want to do is colour in like this, because you can see the overspray that's past that line there. So by being up close, you're going to get a nice clean edge. And make sure that you go paint on, paint off with that 50-50 overlap, as I explained earlier with the shading, instead of going like this and just leaving the air on and trying to colour in like that, because it's going to go patchy. If it does, don't worry too much, you can just coat back over it. Some colours it's going to be harder to eliminate, especially if it's a heavily transparent pigment. The Trident colours are more sort of on the opaque scale than transparent, so they lend themselves a bit more to getting easier and quicker coverage. But you can see the difference here, how clean that is, and we've got a nice even tone. Whereas in here, if I keep coating like this to get it heavy, you're going to get more and more overspray. Okay, look how much overspray. It's almost come right out to here. So just keep that in mind when working on t-shirts, because everything does show up. You can also just get t-shirt material. You don't necessarily have to purchase a t-shirt. So t-shirt material will work just fine, and you can just draw up a whole heap of cartoon characters, and that's always fantastic practice because you'll get all your line work practice, especially if you're following grey lead lines that are already marked out. And then you'll also get your colouring in, and then you can just throw some shadows and highlights on it and you're good to go. So if you want to keep learning how to airbrush, by all means check out our online airbrushing course. You can also take a look at these videos up here, and until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.